Awesome review. Can we all read the first stanza of the song together? It says, Lord, keep my heart always true to you, never backsliding, always viewing you. A heart that is pure, that sees only you. A heart that loves you and treasures only you. One thing I'd really like to focus on today is this matter of our heart. And it's not just our physiological heart, that pumps blood and keeps us alive. But actually in the Bible, it talks about that as human beings, we have inward parts. There's something deep in us. And one of these things is our heart. And as we'll see in this, we're coming to another account in Exodus about what God really desires from us. And as Charlie said, God gave us the law not for us to just follow, not just to obey everything, but actually as a testimony of who He is and actually of what He expects from us. Not that we would follow these things, but that we would become the seekers and lovers of God. And actually, really quickly, I just wanted to go over just kind of everything we've gone through in Exodus real quick from beginning to end. So Exodus has 40 chapters, and then some things we've gone through, right? Like chapter 3, Moses was called, so it's really bad handwriting. There was in chapter 4, there were the subjective signs. In chapter 17, there was the manna, the living water. Chapter 16, there was the manna. So we're kind of going through, right? We're going through this journey of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt, and like Charlie said, ultimately going to the good land. And right now, last week Jefferson mentioned the law, so 20. It's about halfway. So I guess I was really considering, we've almost gone through the entire semester, but we're actually only halfway through Exodus. So what does the rest of Exodus talk about? It's actually the giving. There's the giving of the law, but then there's also this matter of the tabernacle and the priestly service, which we'll get through over the next few weeks. Actually, school this semester is almost over, if you guys can believe it or not. But so this matter of the good land, and then also the tabernacle. Moses went to Mount Sinai, and then God told him the 10 commandments and then a lot of ordinances. But another thing He also told him was the instructions of how to build the tabernacle. So actually we can see this is extremely important to God, right? Half of Exodus is this journey, but the other half are the instructions of what God really desires. He's bringing us out of Egypt. He saved us in the Red Sea. He's giving us the supply of the manna, the living water. But what is all this for? It's that the children of Israel could build the tabernacle, which we'll see next week and in the following weeks. That is the house of God, the dwelling place of God on earth. And this is what God is after. So on one hand, we have God giving Moses this awesome view. He's opening up the heavens, what's really on his heart, what God really wants. But now we come to a really particular story in Exodus 32. Maybe we can all read the first, the big point together. The creation of the golden calf idol in Exodus 32 shows us man's utter inability to keep the law. So the verses are here. You guys can read it later, but I'll just summarize it quickly. So in chapter 31, Moses is on the mountain, Mount Sinai. God is writing the 10 commandments in the tablets of stone. But it's been 40 days since Moses went up the mountain. So now all the children of Israel, millions of them, they're at the bottom of the mountain and they're wondering, what happened to Moses? God spoke through Moses. So now they kind of felt like God was not there. Moses was not there. So then they asked Aaron, which was Moses' brother. They said, come, make a God for us who will go before us. As for this Moses, we do not know what has become of him. So then what Aaron did, he was a priest at that time, he collected gold, earrings, all kind of ornaments from the children of Israel. And then he built, with his engraving tools, he built a golden calf, which is which is an idol. I think that's very clear. We can all see that. This is an idol. Right. And then he built this idol, and then he said, verse 6, and they rose up. Oh, and then Aaron says, he made an altar, and he said, tomorrow shall be a feast to Jehovah. And they rose up early on the next day and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And then verse 7, this is very, very strong. Jehovah spoke to Moses, go, get down, for your people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. So you kind of see these very different situations happening, right? In one situation, Moses is on the mountain, face to face with God. I think that's where we all want to be. But on the other hand, the rest of the people are on the earth. They're making this idol. And we have to see that these children of Israel who are making the idol, right? They are not pagans. They are not unbelievers. Actually, they are God's people who have been saved. They have been redeemed. They are being supplied with the manna, with the living water, right? But we can see that there is still this matter of idolatry can be something that still affects us as believers in a very real way. And I think that's this matter of the heart that I mentioned in the beginning, that today we might not have, especially in Western culture, we might not have physical idols. I mean, actually in a lot of, especially Asian cultures, there are physical idols, in people's houses and all kinds of things like that. And that for sure is evil. But today, even though we don't worship physical things, here we can see that there are a lot of principles that show us that Satan uses many things today in place of physical idols to usurp us, so that we would not be for God. And I think one really striking thing is that in chapter 32, this is kind of the completion of the law. God gave Moses the law over a period of a few chapters. And before the law was officially given to the people, they had already broken it. By creating this idol, they broke the first 3 commandments, the most important commandments. You should have no other God, you should not make any graven images, and you should not take the Lord's name in vain. So we see that man is utterly incapable of keeping the law. So now let's go on to see a little bit more about idols. So here, an idol is anything within our heart that we love more than the Lord and replaces the Lord in our life. And I really like these verses in Ezekiel 4:13 because they show us 2 things. In verse 3, we see that idols are something that we set up in our hearts. And in the next verse, and 2 verses later in verse 5, these idols estrange us from God. I don't know if you guys remember last week when Jefferson mentioned the law, right? He said that God giving his children the law, not only a testimony, but it was actually an engagement, a betrothing of God to man. Actually God desires, at the end of the Bible, there is a wedding. God will marry his corporate people who over time, he's drawing them to himself. He's saving them, supplying them, causing us to love him, that we could marry him one day. And then the law is this picture of God's desire for us to that the direction we would take, that we would become more like him. But on the other hand, this with the children of Israel here in Exodus 32 and this matter of the idols, I think it's just so striking because they were taking something that's looked very much like God, and they were actually even worshiping this idol in a way that they would worship God, but actually they were totally missing the mark. And then because of that, this made God so unhappy that actually God dealt with these idol worshipers in a very strong way. Like a lot of them were actually killed. So it shows that this is a very, very serious matter. And then the next point are some principles of idolatry, which are self-beautification, Satan's usurping of the gifts that God has given us, a worship of amusement and entertainment, and pretense and mixture in worship. I'll just go through these kind of quickly, but self-beautification. What was used to physically make the idols was all the gold that the children of Israel had. And actually, this ties into the second point. If you guys remember, when the children of Israel exited Egypt, what happened? All the Egyptians gave them all their gold, all their precious things. And why? Because of this matter of the tabernacle. Eventually, this gold was supposed to be used for the children of Israel to build the tabernacle. Right. But in this case, Satan had usurped those materials, the things that he had given to his people, that they would be used for something totally opposite to what God's intention. And then so this matter of self-beautification, ornaments fit outwardly, they're to make us look better. But even today, in many things, I was really considering, before I was sharing this, even the matter of, wanting to share a good message today, that can become an idol, something that can replace my pursuit, my desire to gain Christ. If I'm just here, just trying to make a really good message to prove to you all that I can be a good public speaker, which I am not, then I totally missed the mark. I can be saying the exact same words, but in my heart, what is the goal? And I think that's why today this matter of our heart, it's so much more subtle than having a physical idol. And then the next item, worship of amusement and entertainment. And actually, an idol, a calf in the olden days was used for food, right? For feasting, even in Luke 15 with the prodigal son. Let us eat the calf and be merry. But the children of Israel were worshiping this calf. It was not an ox for working or something else. This shows that today, something that can be an idol to us, that can be a source of worship, is actually seeking entertainment and amusement. For sure, in Christianity, often one way, people try to make meetings, or I guess in general, right? We try to attract people. We try to make something enjoyable to the soul. However, we have to be very careful that this kind of enjoyment doesn't go become something of the world, something purely of the soul. And even not in a religious aspect, but just to think about your friends, your peers on the weekends when you have no school, you have no work. What do people do? Most of us, a lot of you are in meetings and things, which is really good. But a lot of times people are just looking for entertainment, right? Looking for release, looking for a source of joy. And all these things can become an idols in our heart, something that we are worshiping, something that is replacing Christ. Because Christ wants to be our real joy. Amen. Wants to be our real enjoyment, entertainment. And finally, pretense and mixture. Actually, this one is really striking. In verse 6, they rose up early and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. So this is actually the correct thing to do, that God commanded, his children, that they would bring offerings to offer to God. But instead, they were taking those things and offering it to the golden calf. And I think, from our perspective, this is silly. But even in our worship, even in our contacting the Lord, do we come to the Lord just to do things for us, to get us out of a situation? Even maybe we want to know His leading. You're seeking what you should do. Some of you are graduating, what you should do for the summer, relationships, just financial situations. There are so many things that I think we all realize we really need God. But on the other hand, what are we really seeking? Are we just seeking something that will end up working out well for us, or are we really seeking the Lord? So finally, I think, let me read this. Instead of being occupied with idols, God desires that we have a soft, pure, and loving heart toward Him. I was so impressed. There are so many places in the Old Testament that talk about our heart and about loving the Lord with our heart. Moses says multiple times in Deuteronomy that we must love the Lord our God with our whole heart. And even some of these verses, Deuteronomy 4:29. And from there you will seek Jehovah your God, and you will find Him if you search for Him with all your heart and with all your soul. And now just considering these verses, God's heart is really not that we would do anything, not that we would follow the law, but that we would love Him. And because we love Him, we would come to Him. We would seek Him. We would pursue Him. I was thinking, my mom calls me a lot, so I talk to her a lot. But a lot of the times, I think maybe she's concerned, or for some reason she's just talking to me and telling me a lot of things. And a lot of times I just end up going okay. And I say okay 10 times. But my intention is really not to do any of the things that she says. Or in another case, you can imagine if your future spouse, your wife or husband, tells you, I love you, and then you're on your phone and you say, okay, how would that make you feel? Probably not very good. So we see that, there's Matthew 8:15. This people honors me with their lips, but their heart stays far away from me. And this matter of our heart is something very inward, something very inner. The person next to you, the people close to us, might not even know our heart. Only God knows our heart. And really, that I think our desire is just that, and which would match God's desire, is that we would have a soft, pure, and loving heart. A heart that is soft, a heart that God can massage, a heart that God can direct, a heart that is pure, which means that it has no other goals. We may be in school, we may be working, we may be, have responsibilities we need to take care of, but is our heart that we would gain Christ? Is our heart that God would be expressed in that situation? And finally, of course, just to have a loving heart. Just to love God, because God loved us, God died for us, and His love is now constraining us. I think, yesterday, 2 days ago yesterday we read in 2 Corinthians 6, about how all things, Paul was saying it in, like, he's poor yet enriching many, sorrowful yet rejoicing. But all things were his, because he loved the Lord, and he, with all his might, even in Philippians, we see really clearly, he counted all things as loss. He was just pursuing Christ with all his might. And I think this kind of desire, this kind of pursuit of Christ, God really honors this. And then eventually, this kind of thirsting, loving God, this results in the children of Israel making it into the good land, and then the tabernacle. And then, as we'll see, actually the tabernacle is a picture of the church. Today we're in the church, not just individual believers, but we're seeking loving God together. And then this is what God really desires, a corporate group of people loving Him, expressing Him. I think so. I think that we can now, I'm finished, and maybe we can read the focus together and then get into our groups. The golden calf was an idol made by God's people and serves as a warning to us today. Anything that occupies our heart other than the Lord is an idol and frustrates God's desire for the building of the tabernacle. We need the Lord's strengthening to be the God-loving seekers who will drop all our idols. I think one last thing, just this first stanza again is so sweet. And sometimes if you don't know what to pray, and it just comes up, you can just pray this back to the Lord, that it's not us by ourselves who can love God, but God in us is love, and that's how we love God, and He's the one that's making our heart soft and pure and loving.